But what you have in sessile fly is from larvae into pupa, then to adults. That's an incomplete metamorphosis. Then the sessile fly lives for about 3 months. The life cycle of Trypanosome involves 2 hosts, man and sessile fly. The sessile fly bites an infected person and sucks up Trypanosome with the blood. So Trypanosome enters the gut of the sessile fly and multiplies by binary fission. The Trypanosome then moves to the salivary gland and remains there. Trypanosome enters the new host's bloodstream before being bitten by the sessile fly. Then the sessile fly puts in saliva, which prevents the wound from clotting. The symptoms of Trypanosome include anemia, that is loss of blood, then loss of weight, painless swollen glands in the neck. How do you treat Trypanosome? By clearing the bush around, by applying insecticide, by using modern drugs, then by using prevention drugs such as pentamidine every 6 months for your cattle, so you prevent the invasion of Trypanosome. We'll be talking about the reproductive systems in vertebrates. Reproductive systems in vertebrates. Then the first vertebrate we'll be talking about is reproduction, is that of fish. So reproduction in fish. The breeding season in fish is the raining season, during which most fishes travel to the spawning grounds and shed their eggs and sperms, and then leave the areas without providing any protection and care. So the fishes during the rainy season travel into the spawning grounds and shed their eggs and sperms there without looking back. But however, in tilapia, the male selects a suitable pit for the female to lay her eggs. So the male gets to dig a hole for the female to lay her egg. Then the body of the female is swollen with ripening eggs. The male and the female change each other in water and swim around the nest pit. This stimulates egg laying and sperm production. The female fish then lays enormous number of eggs in the water to compensate for the high mortality rates for her eggs to young ones. You know, I said the fish just lays the egg without looking back, without protection, and seeing the eggs are not protected, there is high mortality rate, that is, they die in a great number. So to make sure to compensate for this loss, the female makes sure that she lays so much egg. Then after that, the male follows carefully and sheds sperms over the eggs that are laid already. The female, having laid her eggs, immediately begins to take them into her mouth for protection and warmth. The external fertilization of eggs by sperm follows in the mouth of the female. Then after 1 or 2 days, the eggs hatch out into tiny young fishes, which are called fry or fish fry, which remains in the mother's mouth for about 10 days. This method of reproduction is called oviparous. Oviparous, the eggs are laid then before the fertilization occurs. Then the next vertebrate is the toad. So we're looking at reproduction of toad. Also, just as we have in fish, the reproduction of toads occur usually during the raining season. The female body is also swollen by ripe eggs that it contains. The male toad cracks loudly using its vocal cord to attract and excite the female. So when you hear of the toad at night, you know that the male toad is attracting and exciting the female by its vocal cord. Then during mating, the male toad mounts the back of the female and clasps her firmly with its nuclear pad on its forearms. The male discharges sperms on the eggs as they are laid in water. The sperms penetrate the jelly surrounding the eggs and fertilize them. The fertilization is said to be external, and the development is also oviparous, as we have in fish. Each female lays a few hundred eggs to allow for wastage during development, as only few wastage during development, as in only few manage to survive, just as we have in fish. So the toad also lays a few hundred of eggs to allow for wastage. The fertilized egg of a toad can be stimulated to form new individuals. The unfertilized egg of a toad can be stimulated to form new individuals. This is Partnerogenesis. That is when no mating occurs. That is, the egg is not fertilized, but the egg still goes on to develop into a new individual. It is called Partnerogenesis. Then I will now talk about the advantages of the jelly-like material surrounding the egg. There is a jelly-like material that surrounds the egg. So what does it do for the egg? First, it protects the egg from the mechanical injury when the water is disturbed. You know, water moves up and down when an organism enters, swims around. So the jelly-like structure material that surrounds the egg protects the egg. That is, it serves as a buffer or a shock absorber for the egg. Then it prevents the egg from drying up. It attaches the egg to water plants and prevents them from being swept away by the waves of water. Then it keeps the egg afloat, preventing fungi and bacteria from attacking them, then separating the eggs so that they have adequate supply of oxygen. The jelly-like material that surrounds the egg also prevents small water creatures and birds from eating them. The zygote, that is the fertilized egg, divides mitotically into small balls called blastomeres with equivalent nuclei in a process called cleavage to form the embryo. The embryo then feeds and grows around the egg yolk. The dissolved oxygen diffuses through the jelly into the embryo. After 1 to 2 days, the young tadpole or larvae emerges from the jelly and grows. It attaches itself to a water weed by means of a sticky substance secreted by the V-shaped cement gland on the outside of the egg. At this stage, the toad has no mouth. It feeds on the egg yolk. Then it obtains dissolved oxygen through the skin for respiration. The developing eyes, ears, and nostrils can be seen after this time, and an indentation marks the place where the mouth will form. Then it will form blunt projection on either side of the egg and quickly develop into external gills. So we have 2 stages in the development of the toad. We have the external gill stage and the internal gill stage. About 2 to 3 days, this is external gill stage now. The rudiments of the external gills appears on the side of the egg. The mouth opens to the outside, and the tadpole begins to feed on microscopic plants attached to the weeds in the surrounding water, with its only jaws for chewing food particles. The whole body of the tadpole is covered with cilia, which causes currents of water to flow over the gills. The external gills of the tadpole absorb oxygen dissolved in the water, passing over them into the blood capillaries. Oxygen also diffuses through the skin of the tadpole. Later, the body shows distinct head, well-developed mouth, a pair of nostrils, a pair of eyes, a pair of hair pits, which later develops into tympanic membranes. The cement glands disappears, then the external gills are now replaced with internal gills about 6 to 9 days after patching. So we move on to talk about the internal gill stage. During the internal gill stage, the tadpole possesses internal gills and spout for respiration. Just as we have in fish, the water enters the mouth and passes over the gills. Oxygen in the water is absorbed as water passes out through the spout. The muscular tail and the tail fin are used for swimming. The honeyjaws with coiled long intestine are adapted for vegetarian diet, that is feeding on vegetables. As development or metamorphosis continues for 4 to 5 weeks after hatching, the lungs start to develop to replace the internal gill stage. So then the metamorphosis after the internal gill stage now, after about 8 to 9 weeks after hatching, the tadpole swims to the surface of the water to breathe the air. The hind limb buds appear while the forelimbs are formed under the cover of the operculum later. The tail shortens and is reabsorbed. The tadpole changes its diet from vegetarian to carnivorous now. It no longer feeds on vegetables or on plants, rather feeds on animal-like substances. Then, in keeping with this diet change, the coiled intestine becomes shorter and less coiled. The body widens and shortens, the mouth widens, the honeyjaw disappears, while the adult teeth are formed. The eyes of the toad bulge, and the muscular tongue becomes well developed. The lungs develop, and the young toad comes to the surface to breathe through its nostrils. It now leaves water for land. Then the tail disappears altogether. It feeds on insects and other small animals, such as worms. The tongue is tap-fixed at the front of the mouth cavity and free at the back, lying towards the throat. The toad flicks its sticky tongue to catch the prey. Then the mature tadpoles take oxygen through its lungs, while young adults respire through their skin and buccal cavity as well as the lung. Now, metamorphosis